Hello, everybody. What's up? You're listening to I Was Just Wondering with me, Tom Salmon, the show that dives into music, film, and games, and everything else in between. My guest on this week's episode is Nathalie Sejean, an audiovisual storyteller and the founder of mentorless.com, a filmmaking blog with educational articles, DIY advice, interviews, and a weekly newsletter. We jumped into Nathalie's experience as a young French filmmaker in LA that inspired her to start mentorless.com, how she overcame creative burnout, and the joys and challenges of working as a multi-talented storyteller. So if you're running, stuck in a traffic jam, or sitting behind a desk at work, hope you enjoy my interview with Nathalie. Looking back at your time in LA in the summer of 2011, was there a particular moment that stands out to you which made you want to start mentorless.com?
So actually, I spent 4 years in Los Angeles, and I was there between 2008 until the fall of 2011. And the reason why I started Mentorless was a bad reason, I guess. I discovered No Film School, which right now is a very big website, but back then it was just a blog by a filmmaker named Ryan Koo. And he had just started transitioning from a personal blog to a more professional type of website where he was posting an article per day. And this is something I understood afterwards, but I just stumbled upon an article on his website and got lost in it. And I saw an article about, I think him explaining how to make money with ads on blogs. I'm not quite sure it was coming from him, but basically what I do remember is that No Film School had a big impact on me.
Right. And
I was trying to find a way to make money and make a living while staying free and working in a field that was interesting for me. And I had zero knowledge. I didn't know anything about blogging, about making money on the internet. And back then, blogs were still a thing. I mean, today, I think it's it wouldn't even be an idea for someone to do that because you wouldn't make money with a blog unless, I mean, it's very hard.
Yeah.
Almost 10 years ago, it was still a thing, but I cannot even say that I knew that. I didn't know that. It's just that people were talking about it because it was something, so I heard about it. And what happened is that I started the blog. I didn't really thought through what I was going to do with it.
Yeah.
Very quickly, I understood that I was not going to make money with it because what I had to do to make money out of this blog meant basically, well, like pretty much everything in life. When you want to make money, you need to please other people.
Yeah.
So I decided pretty quickly that I was not going to start writing content for people to click on it. And Mentorless became my, my school. This is how I didn't think this was going to be that, and I didn't know I was doing that with this blog. But what happened is that I left LA a few months after I started this blog, and this was my way of staying connected with the American industry for filmmaking, the filmmaking industry in general. And when my curiosity broadened and I started being more interested about the art of storytelling and creativity in general, it also allowed me to keep on educating myself and use this knowledge to share it with others and meet new people, because Mentorless became this way for me to connect with people all over the world.
What I'm sort of interested about is, and I think maybe this is kind of like an old idea, that the fact that you reach a certain point and then you must go to LA because LA is this sort of like hub, this sort of nexus of creativity that's going to take you to the next level. And I just wonder about your time. You spent 4 years there. That's a substantial amount of time. Thinking about it, I mean, what was your sort of like overall sort of like experience, and what was your original sort of intention of going out there, and what did you kind of hope was going to perhaps happen for you over there?
Yes, so it's funny because I think it's going to be the answer of many things in my life, is that what happened in reality was not the consequences of the actions I took. I mean, I don't know. Basically, what I'm trying to say is that when I decided to go to LA, I didn't decide to go to LA. I decided to go to America.
Right.
I knew I wanted to go to America, and I knew I wanted to try. I knew I wanted to be a full-time filmmaker.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted to go to the States because it was this dream of mine to study in America, but I didn't have the money to do a master or a bachelor. I mean, whatever level of studies, I just didn't have the money to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew I wanted to be on the West Coast because of a very stupid reason, which was sun. Sun. So I was very poorly informed because I was self-taught in filmmaking back in France. It was before YouTube. It was before Wikipedia, I think. I mean, the internet was just a different thing. So you just knew whatever your surrounding knew, kind of. Right. And nobody in my family had been there. I mean, nobody was in the filmmaking business. And I ended up in Los Angeles because they had this opportunity for foreign students to take night classes at an affordable price.
Right.
And that was the only thing I could afford. So I ended up in LA, not even really understanding that that was the best town I could have been.
Oh, right, I see. Okay.
So that was, that was my luck. But then what happened for me, I mean, basically right now, I would say that I wouldn't advise someone who is just starting to go to LA, because I don't think LA is a very creative town. Mm-hmm. I think it's a town full of opportunities for people who have access to work opportunities. Right. That's a town where there's a lot of jobs and you can have a lot of meetings. But if you're very green and you're just a beginner, LA, I believe, can really kill one's creativity because the competition is extremely high, even at the entry level of anything. And people are not that genuine at the end of the day. Yeah. But also, that was 9 years ago. Maybe things have changed a lot. I don't know. But when I came out of LA, for instance, I was in complete creative burnout because there's a bit of a lack of diversity in terms of mindsets. Everybody's kind of is running behind the same dream and obsessed with the same thing. And I think that is the worst thing that can happen to someone who is trying to be creative. And that being said, at the same time, I mean, I wouldn't trade my 4 years in LA for anything. I'm very happy. So, like my advice means nothing at the end of the day. If you need to go, just go. But it's just that, it's like I did go there when I decided to commit fully to become a filmmaker, and I ended up in a burnout and realizing that I wasn't willing to pay any price to become a filmmaker, which was, I think, a very important lesson because it made me realize that, yes, I am a filmmaker and I want to direct and write some projects, but I don't care being a filmmaker if being a filmmaker means shooting corporate videos. To me, this is not the type of filmmaker I want to be. So these are some of the things that I learned in LA because the title means nothing. What is meaningful is what you're doing daily in your, So this is one of the stuff I learned in LA. The title is meaningless. Sorry. It's, you don't know. You don't know what's behind when someone tells you I'm a filmmaker, what does that mean? What is your day like? Are you stressed? Are you happy? How much do you make? And does it matter? So this type of stuff.
Well, that's interesting. It's one of the things I kind of think about in terms of, because I was kind of encouraged at a certain point in my career, you have to go to LA, you'll make these contacts and all this thing. And I guess that's fine, as you're saying, if you've got access to proper sort of work opportunities and contacts over there. But just to simply go over there and try and hustle your way to something, I think is a very, very hard proposition, also a debilitating one. And I think it's also one now with the internet, with platforms like Vimeo and YouTube, that you can essentially be a filmmaker anywhere in the world. And if someone sees your work in a particular position of power or whatever, that you can kind of grow yourself into an opportunity to where if you finally wash up on those shores, that you'll have a much better chance of navigating through that rather than just going cold, if that makes sense.
Yes, and I do think that if you make something that fits whatever the LA standard is at this particular time, they will bring you you will get access. People will find you. There are dedicated interns every day scanning the internet to find the next whatever. And if you do something very smart and very, whatever it is, a short film, a music video, and you can, you can find access, and this is a goal of yours, the door will open. And I do also believe that once you start working, LA, whether you want it or not, ends up being the place to be at some point in your career. But financially, LA is much more expensive now. 10 years ago, there was still a big gap between LA and New York. Yeah. Now I think the gap is less interesting if you don't have a lot of money. But I think today, New York is also very, very tough. But I think maybe in terms of creativity, and I'm not talking about filmmaking right now, I'm just talking about juice and creativity and being in a laboratory of people, being, surprising. Or maybe even Austin. I don't know. If I had to pick a middle, if we're going to stick with America, let's say, because none of us is from there. But, I think LA it's a very tough city. It's very weird. The culture there. It was a real cultural shock for me to go to LA, even though I had been to New York several times and I was fed with American TV shows and movies and I thought I knew America. It was a very big shock. But again, with the internet in the last 10 years, maybe the shock would be less intense. I don't know.
I just wanted to sort of dive into Mentalist's message. Please correct me if I get this wrong. So the message is about a mentee who sees a mentor in everything and everyone, and you have a weekly newsletter which you create links to interviews, making of tutorials, and so much more content, which has over 12,000 subscribers. And I just wondered what your thoughts were on being sort of self-taught versus a more formal education pathway in 2019.
So yes, this is exactly what Mentorless is about. It was born at some point. When I speak the title, it was born about the idea of me being frustrated or not having mentors, which is something that I've always wanted to have, watching movies and, this type of stuff. And then realizing that the world is your mentor and whoever you want is your mentor. And with the internet, literally anyone and anything can become a mentor, even if it's just for 10 minutes. For the formal, I believe in continuing education, whatever your age and whether you've been in a great school or, no school. I think there is absolutely no excuse not to educate oneself daily on whatever, it's, in France, at least, this is something this is not the way we are educated. We are educated thinking that you go to school because you have something to learn, and then you become an adult and you work and you don't have anything to learn anymore because you've learned whatever you needed to work. And for me, it was really a process to understand that as a human and as a creative human, but I think both are the same thing at the end of the day, it's a duty to admit that there's a million things we don't know, and even the things we know might change over time. I mean, formal education, I wouldn't know about it because it depends, what access you have, what country you're from, what are the opportunities. There's too many data to take into account that I think it would be too hard to say you should or you should not. But education at large, I do believe it should be something mandatory for everybody on a daily basis. We should all have a pocket of time daily dedicated to the art of learning and discovering what we don't know or questioning what we thought we knew.
Just sort of touching on that, I think in terms of a formal educational pathway, and when I've spoken to people who've done MFAs at UCLA and other things, what it seems to me, the thing they get away from it is not necessarily like the instruction from their teachers, it's more like the community and, I don't know, the quote-unquote hardship, if you can call it that, of the creative process, and then, sort of figuring that sort of side out. In terms of the business side of things, which tends to be it's a thing that you can't really teach, but it's a thing that it's basically sort of like essential. Once you sort of like leave, is more how you arrange your career in terms of sort of like business and an opportunity is the one thing that I guess like education can't give you. in a way, because obviously you're working in a vacuum. But I guess it's that sense of community. But then again, I always go to the fact, well, you've got, as I sort of mentioned before, you've got over sort of 12,000 subscribers for your newsletter. You have a community, and those people can sort of interact. So it's not like there's sort of like a vacuum, that you can find a community pretty much anywhere. I guess it's whether you can interact in IRL with them, I guess, is the sort of differentiate between those two things.
Yeah, and I mean, I agree. Definitely, the difference between someone going to USC and someone not going to a university or UCLA or New York, Columbia or whatever is it's more even than the community. I think we should just say the network, the network opportunities, and these, because at the end of the day, our jobs are not jobs that required any diploma 20 years ago. I mean, it's just not, there's only diplomas because there's competition.
Right.
It's not medicine. We're not learning where's the heart and where are the lungs.
Yeah.
So, but the thing is that one of the things you need is the network. You need the person who is going to ring you to say, hey, we're shooting. Do you want to come around? And this is something that is extremely hard to have. And this is where things can get unfair. Right. Either because you come from your social background is going to play, but also the network from your parents and from your family and whatever, and then also your personality. And I think that when you get to a school, if you're an introvert, at least you have access to these people. You have to make less effort. Right. If you don't go to one of these schools, but you are very extrovert and you can go and hang out in park. I mean, these things are so. They seem unimportant, and they're going to make all the difference.
Right.
And even more in our work line, and I say our work line here, I'm just talking about the filmmaking aspect of my life. But when you're really going to be spending, everybody says it, and that's for a reason. You don't want to be around people you don't appreciate when you're going to spend weeks and months working on a project.
Yeah. It's
just something you don't want to do. So the problem is that you not only need to be talented, but you also need people to like you. And this is a reality. Unless you're a screenwriter, of course, and you just wanted to write screenplays. But for the online community is great. It's great to exchange, and it's great to. I mean, it's a very important support, even though you cannot see these people. But I have to say that there are several instances where I've met some of the people from the online community, and I've developed friendships with some readers that became friends. Okay. Some people hosted me, so this is real as well. Like, you can really, and for my last short film, at the last minute last year, I shot a short film in Turkey. A month before shooting, there was a financial crisis in Turkey, so all our budgets became worth nothing. Right, and so at the last minute, I made a little crowdfunding on my homepage, not even on Kickstarter or whatever. And the people from the newsletter gave me, almost 5,000 euros. Wow. This is amazing. This is really. This is real. It seems stupid to say, but the people looks like number, but they are real people behind the numbers. Yeah. So, but I think both are very important, and especially for some jobs like actors and actresses today, I think it's probably the field in our work that has changed the most, because I find it so crazy how much time we're spending on Instagram right now to cast actors and actresses. And I find it I think a lot of actors and actresses don't appreciate it yet. Mm-hmm. But unfortunately for them, their social media account matters a lot for them to get job. So, now both words are equally important, and it depends just what you're doing and where you're heading.
So I just wanted to touch quickly upon in your last newsletter that you wrote a thing about networking, and you sort of referenced the Defiant Ones and Jimmy Iovine and the fact that he every week would play sort of touch football. For people who haven't read the article, just maybe sort of take us through that and what your thoughts and feelings are about that, and also how you've spoken about it sort of briefly, but how you found sort of navigating networking, and also briefly networking as a female filmmaker. And obviously I don't like putting the gender in front of it, but I realised that from the female filmmakers I have spoken to, that their experience of navigating the film industry is different from for men for a variety of sort of different reasons. And I just wondered if you maybe could sort of like speak on that a little bit.
Yes, so basically the last newsletter, which was 2 weeks ago because I didn't send one this week, which happens very rarely, but it happened. I was just connecting some dots about the fact. What I noticed is that there is this tradition, and I think it's gender-based, but not because men are evil or whatever. It's just because of the history, and women for many, many centuries spent more time inside houses than in public spaces. Mm-hmm. And it's like men are more into the habit of creating these events where they gather between themselves and create bonding and emotional bonding and shared memories over whatever it is. It can be just playing a football game or watching something or just going to a bar, etc., etc. And this is a very powerful way it's an unofficial way of networking. And I was taking as an example this the producer Jimmy Iovine, who was doing a football game every Sunday at his place, mixing all his network and creating some explosive relationship and connections, and other examples. And I think this is not something I think this is something new generation of women are going to learn doing, because I know it sounds weird, but at the end of the day, it's just 3 generations ago, women couldn't have the right to vote or to have a bank account. So certainly they couldn't build a career and network. Female were networking, but it was just not for the same purpose. And now we have the same possibilities. But first we need to deconstruct and understand that we have these possibilities and then act upon them. So, I think that just being a woman in general is different than being a man. And it's totally fine. And I think it's very interesting. I am very happy to be a woman today. I think 50 years ago, I would have been very miserable. But I am, I'm grateful. I'm grateful for being my age today. And for all the women who did the hard work, and I feel I am part of a moment in time that is very interesting, and I hope that we are going to manage to keep on moving and make something interesting for men as well, because I think there is a big revolution that needs to happen for a better life for everybody. But when it comes to networking, I do believe that I am one of these weird people who think that men and women are equal because we are, just human beings. That's what we are at the end of the day. We are no different. But I also acknowledge that we are very different in many other ways. Some because of our culture and education, some because of our physical hormones and whatever. And the thing is that I think there is a type of networking that is easier when you're with your own gender.
Yeah.
And so I'm not saying, basically with my newsletter, probably I didn't clarify that point, but in my head, I was not saying, oh, look how unfair it is because men are not inviting women into this stuff, because I don't think these events would have worked if there were anything else but men. Mm-hmm. And I do think that we need to learn to create events where there's no men, and it's fine. It's just because sometimes when you're with your own group, you can be the way you cannot be when you're not with your own group, and that's okay. I don't know. Maybe this is very politically incorrect what I'm saying. I'm not sure. But this is my experience, is that we should be cool by mixing everybody, and we should be okay with sometimes just guys hanging between guys and girls hanging between girls, and in both cases, great things can happen. It's just that we need, as women, to learn to do that, to to be creative. We need to be more creative about how we mix up events and network, and that's that.
No, I don't think it's politically incorrect to say that there are points of reference, either sort of like culturally, physically, like emotionally, that the sort of separate genders are going to just respond to, because I guess, I know generally speaking, and also if you've got people from the similar sort of social setting or sort of like demographic, again, like there's going to be certain sort of like cultural, emotional and physical touchstones that you can form, bond and relate and talk about, that simply, you know, between the two genders, that perhaps are just not going to have a particular understanding of that. And I think that's totally fine. I think great difference is amazing, having just groups of sort of singular people and just sort of talking and discussing, and also the idea through that as a sense of sort of self-discovery. But I guess that the danger is, and I think what people maybe upsets them, is the fact that if it's just one or the other, not that you can have these multitudes of different experiences that basically will feed and inform and actually make the community in itself a more richer experience.
Exactly. I mean, I think the bottom line is, for me at least, the bottom line is that we should just embrace diversity in all its senses and appreciate the fact that differences can bring quality and interest and creativity. And after that, as you said, I mean, I don't think the answer is everybody being the same, behaving the same, and being controlled. I think we should let ourselves be free but just be okay with the fact that there are other people who are different and that they have their space to express themselves. So
just sort of leading on from that, what do you feel is like the fundamental purpose of using narrative or filmmaking or art, literature to communicate with people, in your opinion?
I mean, it's funny because to me, I don't see the point if this doesn't exist. Right. Like, I grew up reading books because this is what I had. And to me, books, music, films, like fiction, narrative films, they are all the same thing. They are stories. Mm-hmm. And they're just stories expressed differently. What I know, me personally, I come from a small town in France. I was born before the internet. I mean, before the internet became popular in houses, let's say. Right. And so my universe was what I could see until stories and fictions, which entered before books, entered with my parents telling stories and everything. My universe expanded each time I experienced the story. And I learned how to have empathy. I learned how to, understand emotions, situations. I discovered cultures. I discovered, I don't think that if my life was just based on what I have actually lived, I would know so little. And actually, a lot of people are saying that everything is a story. I mean, it doesn't have to be a fiction to be a story. Whatever I'm living, if we were sitting side by side and looking at the same thing, we wouldn't see or feel or tell the story of what we've seen or feel the same way. Yeah. So I personally belong now to this group of people who believe that, there is a kaleidoscope of experiences and everything is a story. So that's why, to me, stories are gentle ways of expanding the human brain and the human heart and helping us not fall into the trap of thinking that the universe is our tiny little reality that we can experience with our five senses at that moment. Yeah. And I think it's just who hasn't in their whole life, who has not dreamt through a story. I don't even understand who would be the human being who would say no story. Yeah. Well, what's the point? I mean, it would be basically, and we don't even know if animals don't dream actually. So, I shouldn't probably make this assumption, but what would a life without stories? What would we be doing? Seriously, why would you build? And I'm sorry, but I'm just going to go even one step further, is that the first house or the first key that someone created was first a story in their head. They had to imagine this key and imagine, it would be so cool if I could close this thing so my neighbors wouldn't steal it from me. And then he had or she had to go through this crazy story to come up with a key.
Right.
So, I think the world is evolving because we have this capacity of imagining and then using whatever we imagine in our head and conveying to others. And it works, sometimes it doesn't work. But what is even more interesting is that even if you try to tell a story and you decide you failed and you couldn't transmit whatever you were trying to transmit, what's very interesting is that you cannot control how humans receive it. And your failed story might ignite something crazy afterwards. And this is the beauty of us, because we're crazy people. So, I don't know. Yeah, so for me, there is no... the question of why would someone try to make a living making stories is another question. But, I don't think you could erase story from humankind.
Well, that's sort of a nice segue into your TEDx talk, which I watched on YouTube with, because it was in French and then they had like the subtitling. So I'm not sure if the subtitling was like 100% correct. But what really struck me about the opening of that particular talk that you gave, and it's something that I've experienced a lot in my sort of creative and sort of professional career, because when you say, I write, I've made short films and stuff, and then people get very, very excited, as you sort of say, and then they go, oh, where can I watch your work? And then can I go see it at the cinema? Is so and so in this? And then as you sort of like talk about in the TEDx talk, that look of sort of like when reality meets expectation of when you start to go through, and then that the inherent sort of, which you spoke about, that there's sort of like disappointment on your behalf when you don't feel any. And I just wondered if you could just maybe talk a little bit more about that and that idea of sort of readjusting sort of reality and meets expectation for people.
I think that nowadays, especially, we live in a very harsh time because we associate success with purpose and meaningfulness. It's very hard today to sustain the idea that whatever you're doing has a reason to be and is worth doing if you don't have recognition at a very... It's not even just recognition nowadays. It's like recognition at a crazy global scale. Yeah. Like, if we don't have this, we are basically... In our head, I really feel that if someone is not telling you, I'm working at Google, or, whether you like Google or not, this is the craziest part, is that, I'm working at Tesla, or I made a movie and it got 1 million views. Like, anything under might do something for you, but anything under 10,000 views will certainly not do anything for you. And it's just crazy. It's just crazy how the expectations from people and the expectations we put on ourselves have shifted in a very silent and unspoken way. I don't think nobody said it to anyone, but it just became this rule that as an artist, and you don't see me, but I'm putting brackets. It's because I don't think because we are not artists. I just think because nobody knows what being an artist means anymore. And I think an artist is someone who creates whatever they have to create, whether society finds it relevant or not, as a matter, And the reality is that in people's mind, an artist is someone who makes a living out of their art and is recognized by society, which is very different. Filmmaking is one of those very, like any artistic field, but one of the hard things with filmmaking is because it's a collaborative art. It's so hard to create a film, and it takes so much time, and it takes so much money, and at the same time, it's one of the best known industry. Yeah. People are generally not very much educated about the painting industry or, the art gallery industry or whatever. But filmmaking, everybody knows kind of that having a a known actor is better than having a unknown actor, and being played in cinema is better than not being played in cinema, and winning festivals is better than not winning festivals.
Yeah.
So people have these kind of questions to understand if you made it, and if they understand you have not made it in the mainstream way, there is this idea that your work is not worth it. I do think that it's a great challenge as a human being. I personally think that the only way to survive this violence, because it is very violent, is to understand why we do what we do, and enjoy the process of whatever project we're doing, and make sure that through this project we grow. Yeah. Because the thing is that the probability of making a good film, A, and B, making a good film that works, is so low. And then repeating this, which is, almost impossible, and making a living out of it, it's just very, the probability is so low that if that's your aim to be happy, or it's going to be impossible.
And also, I think in terms of like the scrutiny. So, say if you, in any other sort of like profession, say if you've met somebody at a party and you say, well, what do you do? And they go, I install air conditioning units. You don't demand that you go and see that person's air conditioning unit or the work that they've done. It's just a sort of nod and like, oh, that's great, you move on. And I think the thing about, especially with film, is that it's a medium that's supposed to be seen. And the fact if that person you're talking to hasn't seen it, then therefore it's considered not to be sort of like successful. But anybody who knows who's ever sort of made a film or engaged with writing something, that in terms of like the end product, and it's a weird thing to sort of say, that really has very little to do with you in a way, in your sort of like creative process, and in terms of what ends up physically being out there is not as maybe could be the least important part of the creative process, because you could have learned exponentially more about your craft, you as an individual, and it could benefit you in ways than just the sort of like physical product that you've kind of made, because you may get more opportunities from that. But it's and also the only time that people engage with filmmaking or with the sort of visual arts is at the very 1%. You're seeing the best of the best, and I've spoken about another sort of podcast which sort of like normalizes the experience, in the sense that one of the sort of analogies I kind of use is when we run in our minds, maybe we run we think we run like Usain Bolt, but most of us are sort of sweating and sort of like puffing, and that's the sort of real world of it experience in terms of that's really kind of what it's like.
At the end of the day, I don't know why so many people want to make film. Okay. Yeah. It's when you think about it, it's weird because do you see? I don't know. Yeah, you know what? I'm just not going to add anything to what you just said, because I think you said it all, and I don't have anything meaningful to add to that. Sorry.
That's fine. No, that's So just moving on. In terms of sort of like creative process, and you did talk about it briefly in the opening about feeling creatively sort of burnt out. I mean, what were the kind of signs and symptoms for you, and that led up to your inability to be able to create, and how did you find your creative energy again?
It's funny because when I diagnosed myself with a creative burnout, I don't think I used those words because they were not as popular back then. Mm-hmm. Now it's become almost like something you have to go through, I feel. Right. But I understood I was in a burnout very easily. I realized that I didn't know anymore why I wanted to make films, and I didn't have any idea what I wanted to talk about. I didn't have the juice. Nothing was exciting me. And it's not only that nothing was exciting me, that I had this wrong grid of criteria to think about a project. Because I was coming from LA, I had been brainwashed into, it was not LA's fault, but that's what I made with my time in LA. I was brainwashed with the idea of write a low budget feature film that you can shoot very quickly with little money, that is like an adaptation of your short film that got into festivals.
Yeah.
So you can maybe get an agent or a manager. I mean, just the recipe. The thing is that, and this is one of the problems when you're trying to make a career out of something that is volatile and that depends on so many things, including your personal growth, unless you decide to make it a recipe. And this is, some people manage to enter this branch, but me, it cost me my creativity. When I tried to force my creativity into a recipe to follow a career, and it just went away. And the thing is that I didn't know what I was, how I was going to. I didn't have a plan to recover my creativity, but it happened naturally because I don't know why, but basically the way I did it, and this is very specific, and this is something I encourage everybody to do, and that I've actually even created creative programs following this idea of the challenge. Mm-hmm. What happened is that first I started by deciding to draw something on a post-it every day.
Right.
It was not so I will recover my creativity. It was just just draw something every day on a post-it and share it. The sharing part is very important as well. And then because I had been drawing every day, there was this new app that came out that was named Tapestry. It doesn't exist anymore, where you could mix writing and drawing. And basically, for me, it felt like this possibility of making a film, just not like basically a storyboard, let's say, like the equivalent of a film, no budget, just my pencil, my imagination, text and drawings. So I made a lot of those. And because I had made a lot of those, then I made a graphic novel. And because I had made a graphic novel, and then, so basically what happened is that stairs. I didn't know it, but I was climbing stairs. So each little step was allowing me to take on a bigger project. Mm-hmm. And until one day, I was just back into my creativity. I was stronger. I had learned other stuff because I ended up developing drawing as a skill to tell stories.
Right.
Because I was in a creative burnout, and you can do a movie per day, but when you're in a creative burnout, making movies is very taxing. And then there's every year there's a lot of creative challenges on a global scale. If you don't want to do it alone, I did a lot of 100 days challenge. Right. 1 year, so it's for 100 days in a row you do something. 1 year I did a 100 days video. I think a great way, if you feel in a burnout, telling it to yourself is very important. Yeah. Admitting the fact that you don't feel creative, even though your creativity is supposed to feed you. I think it's very important to admit it. And then taking baby steps, following your curiosity, even though it doesn't have anything to do with your work or your main field. Yeah. And even though you don't, I think also a very important element is to stop trying to monetize or give a purpose to everything we do. Creating for the sake of creating is one of the reasons we stay creative. And many people I've met that are in creative burnout, and there are many people in creative burnout. Yeah. Most of the time it's because of the money factor. Right. Because they stop allowing themselves to take risks. Everything needs to have a purpose. Everything needs to be justified.
If you only solely create something, the fact that you put a monetary value on what you create, and the hope of getting some sort of remuneration for your creativity on that particular project or whatever you're working on, can be very stifling. And it's also the thing that I was just thinking about it today. It's more like a creative investment that you would be, if you were sort of financially investing in something and it went up by like 1,000% in a year, people would be very, very suspicious of that. There'd be some sort of like con. Whereas if you take the long view of actually what happens to the sort of regular sort of investment you get 2 or 3% a year, and it sort of slowly matures and builds up. And by the end of it, you've got something, a foundation or something, a body of work that represents something, can feel a lot more sort of like satisfying. And in the long run, probably is going to be the thing that's actually going to maybe get attention or perhaps make you money in the long run. I guess there's a lot of sort of short-termism, I think, in terms of each project in a way is like this sort of like lottery ticket, and it's going to, I guess like get access or get you lots of money and stuff, and that can be very, as I say, it can be very sort of debilitating.
One of the very tricky things is that we are really hardwired right now to expect benefits of anything we do. And creativity, it's very frustrating to me that when I try to explain it to people without giving them the success story that will justify the investment. And we're having a hard time to take a leap of faith and understanding that, yes, creativity is like a muscle. This is something I've always said, and many people are saying it right now, like creativity is a muscle. If you don't use it, it atrophies. If you overuse it, it inflames. And it's just like, this is something you need to use on a regular basis and stretch, do all these different type of exercises. But the difference between creativity and a real muscle is the fact that sometimes you don't see the result because you will only understand the result once it's behind you. It's the thing with creativity is that you can only look back to understand what happened. You cannot look at yourself in the mirror and say, I am creative right now. Like, it's just once you've done it that it happened and you can connect the dots. So it's this weird dance between, and also like, for instance, to continue the story with my drawing stuff is that now I did an exhibition. I printed I made 2 graphic novels that I'm selling. Ironically, of course, the drawings that started as a way of nothing. I didn't even think about it as a way of reconnecting with my creativity, but the drawings that were just a genuine activity are now become of my way of making a living.
Right.
But I don't like to say it because then people are thinking I'm going to start drawing every day to make a living. It doesn't work like that.
I had somebody reached out to me on LinkedIn, and he'd found my profile, and he was saying, one of the questions he was sort of asking me is like, well, I write sort of like film reviews and I've done guest posts and stuff. How do I make money from this? And I haven't written a response, but I was just going through my mind of like, what's the best sort of like piece of advice to give someone? Because I think he's still fairly early on in his career. And I guess like this is a bit sort of tangential, but I was listening to another interview with a very famous he's a Canadian producer, and he said that he put in 8 years of work absolutely free, but working with very high level sort of like rap artists, but he never got paid. But in a sense, he was saying, well, I'm creating the opportunity, I'm putting the investment in, and luckily it worked for him. I mean, that's a sort of success story on that. But I think if your aim is to make money, and it's probably like more realistic, it's like I wouldn't say the money should be your goal, or as we were sort of talking about, let that be the thing that sort of validates you and lets you know that you've been successful. The fact that you've written maybe like 100 reviews, and you've enjoyed writing every single one, that's got to be the mark of success that you've communicated, rather than somebody going, well, here's some money and this means something.
Yeah, I mean, I think that living a life led by your creativity, I'm not even going to say making a career as a filmmaker. I'm just going to say living a life led by your creativity is a lifestyle. And it's not the lifestyle that most people want. And it's not the lifestyle that most people are willing to embrace. Because the truth is that I personally, I don't think I know anyone around me who is making money through what they really want to make money from as creatives. And most of the time, either they're making good money and living the life they were expecting, being miserable, because this takes time, or they're not having the life they were expecting to have at our age, but they have their freedom and creativity. We watch, for one, Phoebe Waller-Bridge, which is like the story everybody would love to be. it's great for her, really great for her. And I love her. I think she's brilliant. And I cannot thank her enough for Fleabag and Killing Eve. But the thing is that, I know that she was supported by a loving family, which is more than most people can have. And B, for one of her who managed to survive through all the obstacles, there's thousands who either gave up by changing careers or by I don't want to say selling out, but basically making money, not doing what they want to do, but still in our feet. And the thing is that I don't make a lot of money, and there are a lot of moments where I work for a fraction of what I should have based on my expertise and my skills, or I make good money doing something stupid. And this is a reality. And I think that people who try to create stability in the world of creativity are bound to be disappointed.
So one of my earliest memories of mentalist.com and you was the vlogs you did on your feature film project in 5 years. I just rewatched the first episode you posted back in December 2015, which was titled 52 Weeks to Make a Feature, and you spoke about 4 obstacles, which were being an unknown filmmaker, being a foreign filmmaker, being a female filmmaker, and being an indie filmmaker. So I just want to jump forward to well, we're not in August anymore. We're just about in August. When it comes out, probably in September. What's the journey been like so far in getting In 5 Years made? And have those obstacles sort of changed, or have they disappeared?
First, I'm happy to know that you saw it, because there's not many of you who have seen it. And again, you think that, I don't know, maybe 1,000 people saw this first video. I have no idea. And still here we are talking, which means that small actions can have unpredictable results. So the project is in a drawer right now. It's interesting because within 5 years, when we decided to do it, to try to do it with my then producer, who is no longer my producer, we had this. We were very naive, despite the fact that we shouldn't have been naive. But you're always naive of something. You always have a blind spot, and when you learn about it, you're like, I wish I had known. And at the same time, I had to go through that. Yeah. So we didn't. I mean, it would be very long to explain everything that happened, but what I can say is that so I'm no longer doing this feature film. Okay. And I have outgrown the story, which is funny. And I'm currently writing another feature film in French this time with a co-writer. Okay. But what was very interesting with this process is that even though I did not make the feature film because we couldn't raise the money, that was so. Let's say one of the reasons was while trying to raise the money, we ended up being, we were selected into several pitching platforms. We were selected into a program during all of 2017 that was very enlightening, where we met dozens of producers and screenwriters, and it was like a masterclass for producers. And as a screenwriter, I got to go there. So it was very interesting. So I learned a ton of stuff. The thing is that sometimes the more you learn, the less you do. And this is a little bit what happened with us, is that the more you know, the more ambitious your brain gets, but the reality not so much. Right. And the script got expanded. It got bigger, and by getting bigger, the budget multiplied by 5. And so normally it's supposed to go the other way around. And so to make this long story shorter, last year in January, so 2 years after you watched the first vlog, I told myself it's been 2 years already. I think this is the last year where I'm going to work on this feature, and then probably we're going to give up on it. Right. So I told myself, I need to make a short film. I need to make a short film so I can show the concept of the feature film, and I can have something on my resume, and I can update my resume with something that is relevant to my universe and my sensitivity. And we went on to making this short film that I shot last year. And it had many benefits, but none of the benefits I expected. Right. Because during the short film with the producer, we had never worked together before. And we realized that we did not work well at all together. Oh, okay. This was very important, actually, because you want to discover that over 2 days of shooting, and not over 5 weeks of shooting or 2 weeks of shooting. So we basically realized that our creativity was canceling each other. The way we were expressing ourselves, expecting things to happen, our work standards, everything was different. We did not want to do this feature film together. And the thing is that the feature film was really based in Turkey because I had lived in Turkey for 2 years. You know, there was no... My life had changed. Turkey changed a lot. There's been a lot of political events that happening there, and it didn't seem logical for me to keep trying making a film in Turkey when I was no longer living there and things had changed so much. But the good thing that happened is that I met 2 people during the shooting of this short film, including the lead actress of the short film, who became key creative collaborators for me this year.
Right.
And I ended up getting booked for as a director for to shoot a series, thanks to the lead actress,
right,
of the short film, because she loved the way I directed her. So she gave my name to the studio, and they interviewed me, and I got the job. And this was completely unexpected. If I had not done the short film, I wouldn't have get the job. And then this year has been a very different year. As you might have noticed, I stopped writing blog posts. I've changed my newsletter, and those are all related to this new creative chapter of my life that is a consequence of the short film, and the short film is a consequence of the feature film. So, I think what I'm trying to say is something I deeply believe in, which is motion. Being in motion,
right? Yeah,
is extremely important because I never get what I think I'm going to get, and I never get the result. I wish and I fantasize for and whatever, because we always hope that this short film is going to get me to the next step of my career.
Yeah,
it did. Yeah. It really did, but just not at all in the ways I was planning it. For people who are trying to, rationalize creative careers are going to be disappointed, because you have to pretend you can control stuff, but at the end of the day, you can never control anything. Results are never what you thought they're going to be. And if you cannot have this flexibility, it's torture.
Yeah.
It's torture. But in my case, it's bliss. I love it.
I think I watched the trailer to the was it the web series that you directed? Was it? I'm probably going to pronounce it. Was
exactly.
It Psycho-E or something? I'm sorry,
Psychiatry.
Just because web series are more, they're seemingly a lot more popular. I mean, they've been around for, I don't know, I want to say 10 years or something, but they're now more being used as more sort of vehicles. They seem to they're less of an oddity and more of a pathway to something, and they can get picked up into more sort of mainstream channels. I'm thinking of things like High Maintenance is the one that just sort of off the top of my head that I can think of. What was it like for you working on something like that, and also in terms of how many episodes did you kind of shoot, and what was it like sort of telling a more longer form episodic narrative?
This experience, for instance, was amazing. And it was funny because I was shooting in France, and I knew, but I should just say that this was a produced series. So it is a web series because it's on the web, but it is behind a paywall. So, everybody was paid. It was not like a short budget. The budget was not big, but, it was a official job by a studio, produced and everything. So for this already was nice, but what was really nice is that despite the fact that we were paid, it was a small economy, and we had to shoot 4 episodes of 6 minutes in 4 days.
Right.
So it was labor intensive. The whole team, I knew nobody. I was a director, and I knew no one, and they almost all knew each other because, like in regular TV shows, the crew kind of always work on the same stuff, and the director is the one who is changing the most. And everybody was so professional. Everybody was in their 30s, late 20s. I was probably the oldest person on this team, and I'm 36. Which is, when you're 25, it seems old, but when you're 36, it does not. So everybody was extremely professional and extremely passionate, as if they had never gone through the years of bumps, which I love. I love people who are like that. I love people who can have keep the joy of creating pure and yet use the years of practice to be extremely good at what they're doing. And honestly, it was tough. Like, of course, when you watch it, you know, there's million stuff I could have done better. So it was one of those jobs when I felt, yes, of course, if you give me whatever I want, I would have done it differently. But under these constraints, it's a solid, and it's not something I say often, it was really a pleasure to work on this. And, but this was a very, you know, it's an exception. It's not like high maintenance where they put their own money.
Right.
And then they got picked up. I know another filmmaker who has done a web series, and she's invested her money, and it took her years of her life. And then you need to try to sell it. And it's basically like a short film. It's just, I think the odds are maybe a little bit thinner.
I just wanted to jump into the OA. So for people who haven't seen it, I'll sort of describe it a little bit. So it's a Netflix TV series written and produced by Brit Marling. It was a bold and intricate sci-fi based narrative which was mesmerising, but sadly it's been cancelled by Netflix after 2 seasons. And you referenced in your newsletter that Marlin's Instagram post, which she spoke about sci-fi being a place where she could wipe the slate clean from typical Hollywood portrayals of women on screen. I just wondered what your thoughts were on the OA and Marling's comments about female characters in film and TV.
I love Brit Marling's career. I don't know her as a person, but I respect her career. I've been following her for a long time. She started pretty much breaking through when I arrived in LA. Right. And she has this sci-fi sensitivity, just the same as me. When I started making short films, my short films were always sci-fi, and I didn't have the words to understand why I was doing that, because I was not a big sci-fi reader when I was reading books. And she put words where, you know, before me, which is basically, if you put a woman in the regular world, her options are kind of boring, especially if you go back in time by 15 years. So it's more interesting to imagine different ways and different words so you can create different characters. And they don't necessarily need to be women, but it doesn't have, and this is one of the big things with the OA. I started watching it very late, actually. I watched the first season when the second season came out because so many people around me were positive about it. And I couldn't believe it. And actually, I couldn't believe that this TV show got greenlit, and I couldn't believe that they managed to sell these ideas. They managed to take so much time because the process there, you know, there was a long gap between the first season and the second season because they are doing everything different. And so I'm not surprised that it got cancelled. and you know, I'm laughing, but I was very sad in a way that was beautiful, because it's rare now to feel this type of emotions for stories, because we have so many of them that we can replace them quite easily, unfortunately. It's sad to say, but it reminded me of the emotional involvement I had when I was younger and I had less to work with, in a way. And I was very sad when I heard it was cancelled because I think it's an important TV show. Actually, I know people who hate it, and I think this is interesting when a TV show, I shouldn't say TV show, is igniting this type of reactions. And if you haven't seen the OA, and I encourage you watching it because it's challenging and because it does one of the things that I am starting to see, and I'm seeing, and I am vibrating about this as well, is how do you tell stories nowadays in 2019? How do you tell stories that are not just human-centric?
Right.
How do you tell stories that are not just about me, tiny human, my emotions, my wants, my desire, my needs? How do you destroy Joseph Campbell's recipe? And how do you we are living in an interesting time where people are becoming obsessed about not changing stories. They want the same story over and over and over and over again, the same superhero stories and the same. And you would think that we should be living in this explosion of creativity. And at the end of the day, it's a lot of the same right now. And so when and I think one of the interesting things about the rise of women storyteller is that because we have not heard their voices, the one who managed to stay connected to their uniqueness bring something different. And Britt Marling is one of them. Phoebe Waller-Bridge is one of them. Even though she is human-centric in her storytelling, the techniques she uses are very refreshing. And Britt Marling is just the only other person I have seen, and I don't know everything out there, so if there's anything else, I'll be happy to hear about it, is the movie Okja. Right. I don't know if you've seen it, that I have mentioned many times in my newsletters. It won Cannes. It won something at Cannes in 2016 or 15. It was one of the first films produced by Netflix, original film produced by Netflix. And this is a movie that managed to follow all the storytelling codes of screenwriting. First act, second act, third act, the heroes lost everything. Everything is in it. Yeah. But the message of the story and the characters of the story, you've never seen. This is, I think when someone manages to do that, it's mind-blowing.
So I watched the first season of The Eye because I watched The Sound of My Voice. I'd seen a few of Britt Marling's and Another Earth of the sort of films that she'd worked on. And I remember watching it and thinking this, and especially the ending, the first season, I remember watching it thinking this is either one of the most poorly judged things I've ever seen, or it's one of the most beautiful, imaginative and creative things that I've ever seen. And I think I had those two reactions to that particular ending, just because of what it was sort of dealing with and the proliferation of school shootings at that particular sort of point. If it's a spoiler, I'm sorry. But I think, and I was talking to a friend about it actually the other day. I said I like things where you can see somebody really, really being overly ambitious, really swinging for the fences, and maybe it sort of strays to being a bit sort of pretentious, but it's that unbridled creative vision that someone has, that they're really, really going for something, and everything may not work. I should just say that the ending to the second series is probably the most startling, most original ending of a TV series I have ever seen. It's a kind of ending that Lost or any other sort of big TV show or that Sopranos could only dream of doing something like that. But it also makes perfect sense that that's how that show would end. It's so meta and it's so clever. And it almost so puts me a little in mind of something that maybe sort of Dan Harmon would do, because he has that sort of dexterity of pop culture and moulding it. And I even now I'm really sort of sad that they didn't. Even the ending alone should have guaranteed a third season. The amount of money that Netflix throws at projects, the amount of content they make, surely they could give her a bit more money. But my only sort of summing up my thoughts, so the only danger I have is that somebody will go well, we're not going to do another TV series, but in order to finish that story, we'll give you money for a 2-hour movie. And I think that's probably the worst thing that they could do with that particular story, because to my mind it is just purely episodic. It's a novel. You can't sum that up in sort of a 2-hour more formulaic narrative.
It's very frustrating, but it's a testament to me. What I love with the OA is that it gives me a glimpse of everything that's possible, even though at the same time it shows that mainstream will not support. It's an anomaly. The fact that they got funding in the first place is an anomaly, and it was giving me hope. This hope has been taken away, but it doesn't matter. It existed, and there. I am sure there are so many other people who have, this imagination, this creativity, and who are waiting to get the money. And this is what is frustrating, I think, is that when you watch whatever, Netflix or Amazon I watch Netflix and I'm very happy with it, but there is a moment where you kind of start feeling that everybody's telling the story the same way.
Yeah.
One of the things that I like with Netflix, and it's still very small, and I hope it will expand, is that, I watched Dark, the German show. It just feels so good to see other faces, to see other, it's a very sleek show. Huh? The image is beautiful. It's not like Germans are being super crazy and innovative in terms of they're completely owning the tools of filmmaking for this TV show. But it's another language. People have other faces. They behave differently. They react differently, and it just feels good. It feels good to get out, to get away from the American and British monopoly that I love.
Yeah.
But at some point you realize that you start believing that the whole world is like that when it's really not.
So just sort of jumping on that particular point, I mean, what do you think the future of storytelling is? I mean, at the moment we have things like augmented reality, virtual reality, immersive cinema, social media, streaming platforms, and surely more like emerging sort of technologies. Do you think, I think my question is, do you think one day that we'll live in a world where everybody is a storyteller with their own channel?
But I think it's almost already the case. It's just that, and I think we are all storyteller with our own channel every time we open our mouth.
Right.
So it's just that, once again, the only difference is, there are two differences. The one who wants to turn this natural thing we're all doing into art form.
Right.
And I don't think everybody will want to turn their storytelling skills into an art form. But I do think that we almost all have already a channel to express our storytelling skills through our social media. And the other thing is the money. So we consider professional storytellers those who are making a living out of it, or say they want to become professional storytellers. I think that the future of storytelling is, I think it's hard because I do really feel everything is stories. So if we are talking about professions, I think it's not going to be, I think the careers we've grown up knowing about, like Spielberg and Scorsese, are long gone. Those profiles are not going to happen ever again. There was this little window in time where you could be a 20-something guy and we would give you millions and you would make a movie. This is over. Yeah. There will be always a guy who will receive millions, but, there will be one, and before there were five. So it's not going to become a generality. I think that if you're not the highest at your own skills, like the guy who is doing the choreography for Beyonce, and I don't even know if that's the same person renewed every year. Basically, I think that if you're planning to make a career out of storytelling, you should see it as a one medium type of way of expression. I think careers as just one thing are going to be extremely rare. And maybe this one person is going to make just TV shows. But even as a human being, I think it's interesting to evolve. I mean, if you see Steven Soderbergh, for instance, which I think is one of the last of his kind, even him keeps changing and moving and morphing around the same, medium. Yeah. And he's playing with the iPhone and with the apps and transmedia. So I think there's going to be a lot of careers in storytelling. I think it's going to be extremely complicated to sell one recipe even more than before. Yeah. And it's going to be about each one of us need to be very creative and very resilient. If you don't have a good fortune under your butt to rely on, basically. And at the same time, I think it's the same for everything. I mean, I'm making fun of our field because I think it's a funny field, but I wouldn't be so confident if I was an employee at any company today. And I think if you're going to live in this world we're living in right now, which is extremely uncertain, we're living so long, one career is a myth nowadays. I would rather be on our side, and at least we know from the get-go that it's going to be complicated and uncertain, so we're not surprised, so that's fine.
And just following on from that, I mean, where do you see Mentorless in like the next 5 years? I mean, do you have any plans to expand your creative courses? And I was just thinking, I mean, probably not, but like seeking maybe funding from a larger sort of media company to sort of grow your brand. But I kind of get the feeling that's not something you might be that interested in.
Yeah, I mean, that's for sure. I won't, and I don't think it's worth anything to any media company, to be honest. So even if I wanted to, I think I would have to go through a total surgery for my little blog to seduce an investor.
Yeah.
So, I won't do that. I won't buy fake boobs and fake lips for my blog. I don't know, to be honest with you, it's once again, you're catching me at a funny time in my life, because after 7 years of having Mentorless as the core foundation of my, schedule, every week I was writing between 1 to 3 articles per week, and was sending the newsletter every Sunday. Then in last May, so a few months ago, I decided to stop. I was actually in the middle of a challenge where I was like, I'm going to write an article per day, every day for 30 days, because I love this platform. I love it so much. And part of me wants to keep doing it. And then in the middle of this challenge, I was enjoying it, but I was realizing, you know what? This is something that is not the right thing for you right now. Part of it because, as I said, with my short film, I got some creative relationships that developed, and now I am working on big projects, not necessarily projects that are paying, but big creative projects, and I understood that I can do it all. And it was very hard for me because I had to make, for the first time in 7 years, I was at the moment where I had to tell myself, if you want to do these projects, you need to stop the blog for now.
Right.
And it was also hard to see that it didn't change much, as a matter of fact, because I already have my newsletter with, everybody on the newsletter. The blog is great, but at least right now, I don't feel there is an impact on my daily life. I miss it. I just wish I had 3 hours more every day so I could work on the blog every day, but I don't have them.
Yeah.
So right now, the blog is on hold.
Right.
Every time I read something interesting, I'm like, I should write an article. And then I'm like, why? Just don't spend it. I'm trying to understand that I'm trying to be more mindful and spend my time doing it just because it's a habit. If it's right now, it's just not the thing that I need to do for my choices. And then, I love the newsletter. And it's also a funny time because after 7 years of sending it on Sunday and having it as my Sunday ritual, I moved it to Monday.
Yeah.
And since I've been doing it on Monday, it changed everything for me. I've actually skipped twice doing my newsletter. I forgot doing it, which is crazy because and this is also something I find interesting because you think something is a habit and it's so easy to move just a tiny thing and see everything change around you, which I find very exciting. You just don't know which move is going to create a crazy ripple effect. And right now with the newsletter, I love it. I think it's very important, but I am also I'm in a difficult situation because I've been back in France for 2 years now, 3 years. And so I am having a language problem because my newsletter is in English, but I am not working in an English-speaking country.
Right.
And so the network I'm making in France cannot relate to my newsletter. And the people who are relating to my newsletter cannot become network opportunity because I'm not where they are.
Yeah.
And it's weird I don't wish I was an English speaker because it's fine. I'm very happy to be French, but it's just that this is one of those weird decisions that I took 7 years ago. And now it's becoming this situation where I'm like, should I make 2 newsletters? Should I drop the English newsletter? But at the same time, I love it so much. And there are a few thousand people who are reading it, and I know they're enjoying it too. And it's nice. I just think it's nice to put something free in the world and share with the world. I think it's very important because the whole operation is just costing me money. It's not bringing money.
Right.
And because I decided not to try to. I tried a couple of times, realized that it was eating my soul, and dropped it. And then I have creative programs that I love doing. I love creating them. I have another creative program that I want to do, and I'm, this is something that I think is part of my calling, helping people reconnect with their creativity or nurture their creativity.
Yeah.
But there's always a but with me, and the but here is that I hate the marketing and the promoting and the selling. This, like money is just something that bores me. It's unfortunate in the world we live in, but chasing money and telling people why I deserve them to give me money because I work in a world where people will gladly give hundreds of or thousands of euros on crazy stuff. Made in very poor conditions, and it's just like the whole world is a bit too odd for me right now, and and so it's very painful for me to have to keep on justifying why I deserve money. So I don't know. The answer is I will discover it with you.
Something that just came to me before the interview, and it's something that I haven't really talked about too much on the podcast so far, but I think it's an important thing to talk about because it's something that sort of like obviously feeds this sort of creative process. I mean, what's your thought on sort of like romantic relationships and creativity? Because I know for my own sort of like personal life, I feel for me there's been points in my life where my creative pursuit has affected, not for the better, my my romantic relationships, whether they be big or small. I just wondered, obviously not to get too personal, I don't want to be dredging up any really horrible memories or anything like that, but I just wondered how you've kind of balanced the idea of your sort of like private life and like creative life, and obviously I don't know if you're with somebody at the moment, but in terms of if you're with a sort of like partner who may or may not be sort of like creative, how have you kind of like juggled those two things? Because I think the question I'm kind of getting to is that it can be a very hard thing to explain or make somebody else understand that you're in a romantic relationship with your particular desire or passion to communicate, and how that might override but not necessarily take away from the relationship you're having with them.
I think it's, of course, it's a case by case and everybody's different. Me, I am in a relationship. It's been 4 years, so it's fine. I mean, I don't know if it's fine, but it's okay. it seems to be working.
Yeah.
But for many years before that, I was I was in a relationship with my work mostly. And I definitely think that it's a lifestyle to have a creative career, and it's I consider myself lucky. I think you need to have a lot of luck to find someone who understands this and at the same time has their own creative life on their, like finding the right person with the right balance without compromising your own efforts is a bit of a lottery ticket. At some point, you need to change the way you work. You need to modify things and make a new person enter your life. And for me, doing this, it basically made me realize that I was working a lot for not much at some point. And when I say not much, is that because I had all this space to indulge myself into my passion, I was also having a lot of atrophies in my life. I was not a balanced person in terms of lifestyle. Not that everybody needs to be balanced. Everybody does whatever they want, but I am much more, it's this interesting thing that by committing into a serious relationship, I had to make time for this person. So I had to work differently. So I had to develop better systems or sacrifice things that I thought were important but were not.
Right.
Basically, I had to clean up my own house and inside a house. And if you do it well, I don't know if well is the right word, but I think if you do it in a healthy way, your creativity always gets stronger.
Right.
But, I also am with a partner who is okay with me always traveling, always being on projects, sometimes doing crazy hours. And, all these things are real. Like, I didn't find a recipe for that. And I don't want a recipe for that. Otherwise, I would be doing another job. Yeah. But at the same time, there was also, like, you cannot have something. I do think that we all have a certain amount of space in us.
Yeah.
And you cannot keep on putting more things. It's just not possible. Like, you need to take out stuff if you want to bring something new. And to me, honestly, for a very long time I was, and I might become again, because even though right now I think that, I'm with this person for as long as it, for many, many decades, but maybe not. And whatever happened, I don't think that this is, I don't think being in a romantic relationship is central in one's life.
Right.
I think what's central in one's life is to have loving relationships, which is very different. And nurturing, there's no point for me nurturing a romantic relationship if you don't have good and solid relationships with friends.
Yeah.
I'm not going to say about family because nobody choose, some people have very weird families and they have nothing to do with it. So, but, your heart family, the family you chose, whatever that family is, whether it's your blood or your, heart family, I think do this first. Who cares about romantic relationship? Because romantic relationship is one relationship that is going to ask you to amputate a lot of yourself at the end of the day, and before making this sacrifice, there's a lot to enjoy first. I think. So I think our society has made us obsessed. It's like money. Like, you're not a full person until you find your other half. I think this is stupid bullshit, and it's so. I mean, it's ironic that I'm in a relationship because really I'm not pro relationships, and I don't think that. I think a lot of people are wasting their time thinking the other person is going to save them when they should be doing continuing education. Full circle. Do your continuing education first, maybe. And then you will find someone.
So I just had one final question for you, and it's one that I ask all my guests at the end of the interviews. What's your dream project if money and time wasn't an issue?
No, that's a good question. What's my dream project? I do think that I would really, really love to work on a project that evolves over time. And right now, the only thing I can see, I would love to be the creator of a show and direct it in some capacities, because you cannot direct everything. But I think shows are something quite unique, and series of books. But I know for sure that I will never write, and it's not a fantasy of mine to write a series of books. When I think of Harry Potter,
right,
and when I think of, from the brain of one human, the millions of people whose life has been changed, and the hundreds or thousands of works that have been created, and how many, it's just sick. So I would never expect to produce something as powerful as what J.K. Rowling did, but I would love to work on something where a character evolves over time. And I would like to do it in a collaborative way. I would not, I'm not someone who can, I would like to have a co-writer, a co-creator of the show. And this would be something that I would love, working on something for several years and seeing the evolution of this work. I would love that.
Would it be something sort of sci-fi based? Is that something, there's that sort of thing that would have sort of appealed to you?
I love sci-fi, so, but I have not. It doesn't have to be. The only thing is that I don't think it would be fantasy. It's ironic because I just mentioned Harry Potter, but I'm not. I'm more a sci-fi person and a fantasy producer, like story producer. I will never come up with a fantasy story. I will always come up with sci-fi. But I don't think it matters. I think what matters is that it's the characters. Very cliche, but so true. Like my favorite TV shows right now. I just bought Battlestar Galactica, which is a sci-fi show. Yes, in DVD to watch it again. But I love The Wire. The Wire had a crucial impact on me. And The Wire is like, I will never go to Baltimore ever in my life. So, to me, it's just like sci-fi. I mean, it has nothing to do with the fact that it's in a spaceship or in an American town where I will never go because there's no way I'm going to spend money to go to Baltimore. So, it doesn't matter. It's the characters that are important.
So there you have it. I had a great time chatting with Nathalie. Please do like and subscribe to the show on SoundCloud and YouTube and drop a comment or two. And you can get in touch with me at the Salmoning01 on Instagram. Thank you so much for listening. I've been Tom and I'll catch up with you next episode.